in the chat, but I think we said we'd start back at 12 with us finishing the last session a bit earlier. So hopefully those of you that have nipped off will hear me saying hello again and come back, and I will fill 2 minutes of time to give you a chance to run back from the kitchen. I think hopefully all of you will agree that so far the sessions this morning have been completely inspirational, whether that be, you know, hearing about the current state and some of the kind of statistics and things that go into the background of all of this, but then also those moving stories that we heard not that long ago before the break from Corey, Lucia and Angela. As I said, we would have loved to have had Lucia and Angela joining us as part of our panel as well, but technology wasn't our friend yesterday. So what we are going to be doing is inviting John, Stephen and Corey back to the stage. And this is your chance really to ask as many questions that you've been building up, any comments. I know one person earlier did have their hand raised, so if they are still keen to come back on stage, please do put your hand back up again, or keep it up if it's still up, and we will bring you on stage, and then your camera and microphone will turn on and you're able to ask your question, but you will be part of the recorded session. That's the only caveat. So if you're screen shy, best to type your question in the chat, and if not, then pop your hand up and we'll invite you on stage in our virtual limo. So without further ado, if we could welcome John, Stephen and Corey back to the stage. I've got a couple of questions already for us to start going through. There we go. John's found his way back. Hi, John.
Hi.
Oh, we can see hands flying up already. This is brilliant. Hi, Corey. And then hopefully Stephen will be back with us any second now. Amazing. Right, okay, great. So thanks for joining us again, guys. And again, thanks for your presentations earlier today. You're going to be put on the spot, hopefully not too much by our audience. But one of the things that I thought would be really powerful for us all to think about, just to introduce this bit, one of our former presidents used to say that as a housing professional, you can do more for somebody in a day than what a lot of other people can do in a whole lifetime. So when you start thinking about these issues that we've discussed and you hear the experiences and things, housing can have such a transformative impact on people's lives. And I think you really felt that when Corey was speaking. So you can do things as a housing organisation, as a housing professional, and hopefully today we'll signpost you to some really good resources, training, support, accreditations and things that you can get involved in that will really help people in the future. So in no particular order, I can see that Kim has got her hand up. So if we could bring Kim onto the stage to join our lovely panel. Hopefully she's hot-footing it up onto stage. This is always a moment of suspense. I wish we had a drum roll or something.
Yeah.
I should have probably pre-warned people as well that my dog Ralph likes to join panel discussions as well. And if my Amazon delivery comes earlier than I'm expecting, we could all be in trouble. So I will mute myself just in case. Kim, I think you're with us, but you haven't got the camera on. But if we can try and hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely fantastic morning. I've learned so much in this whole session. I just cannot tell you. I wish I could express it. I just wanted to raise the issue of, I'm from the Black community, and I wanted to raise the issue of, you know, there being still prevalent issues around lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans groups within the community. How are you trying to move forward working with the Black community to address those issues? You know, Corey presented brilliantly around some of those issues and being very careful about what he said, which I really appreciate. But I just wanted to know how we are moving forward as a group.
That's a great question. Thank you, Kim. Stephen, if we could come to you first, because I did quote one of your statistics, I hope correctly earlier, that over 70% of people you work with come from BAME backgrounds. So I'll hand over to you, and then I don't know if Corey's got anything more to add to it.
Yeah, thanks, Begs. Yeah, so it's really interesting for us because do you remember I was talking about overrepresentation of LGBTQ plus people in homelessness? Then we also see an overrepresentation of Black and minority ethnic people within that cohort as well. So the stat, Rebecca, you got it almost right. The stat is that we work with about 1,200 people per year, and 50% of those are Black and minority ethnic people. Then when you look in our accommodation services, so if you kind of hone in to the people that actually come and live with us, that stat jumps up to 77%. So yeah, over 70%. And so there's this real overrepresentation of Black and minority ethnic people who need support around LGBTQ plus homelessness and housing issues. And so we have to try and figure out why is that happening? And I think, Corey, you did a really good job of helping us understand what some of the family dynamics might be like whenever you come from a Black and minority ethnic background. I mean, it's different for every family, isn't it? But there's some themes that can kind of run through. So there's something about really understanding why that's the case. Why are these groups overrepresented? And then for us at Stonewall Housing, and particularly with the House of Stonewall, it's about finding ways for people to share their stories and tell us what it's like. So that's why we invite people to come along to our events and to tell people what it's really like to be LGBTQ plus, to be Black and minority ethnic, and to have these additional kind of vulnerabilities or challenges around housing and homelessness. So we very much see that as our responsibility to champion and to provide a platform for people to share that voice. The other thing that we do is work in partnership with specific BAME organizations, and to really find ways to work in partnership. So to find an opportunity for our service users to get some specific support, or find an opportunity for our service users to help people understand their experiences as well. There's so much work that needs to be done, number one, in understanding it, and then number two, in being able to really move it forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Corey, have you got anything that you want to add? Completely up to you. I'm not going to put you on the spot.
I was just going to say, jumping off that, yeah, I do feel like sharing more openly is a big thing within this as well, because I feel like, you know what, right? It's very, when you come from certain areas and backgrounds, or you've had certain backlash before, or you're just uncomfortable. I feel like within the within many groups of people and the whole LGBT community, but in different ways, but especially within the Black community, being Black and LGBT, there is this sense of there is a lot of reason to feel like you need to internalize certain things and to feel like you need to hide in certain ways or whatnot. And I feel like, you know what, one person I really love is someone called Monroe Bergdorf, right? Partially because she's so open and vocal, and she's so willing to be seen, and she just leads by example. And you know what, it's hard because she does get a lot of backlash herself and stuff like that. But she's a lovely human being, and I actually met her at one of the House of Stonewall events. And I feel like the more we share our stories, and the more the more visible we will become, the more it will have a domino effect and a knock-on effect. And the more conversations will be sparked within certain communities about things which pertain to like feeling persecuted or things that anyone may have internalized. And the more conversations start, and we can just confront the issues head on, and we can normalize just being there and being seen, the more we'll progress and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? I feel like,
do you know, Corey and Stephen, it does, because I think that as a group of people, we have to be visible. We have to be out there, and we have to speak the truth in a very respectful way, because we don't want to cause offense, but we have to speak the truth. And I think that there are lots of issues which go back. I'm not going to talk about them openly, but if I was just speaking to you on your own, Corey, I'd probably have a long chat, or Stephen. But thank you. That was really good. Thank you for sharing.
Do you know, Rebecca, just to add to that discussion, and particularly thinking about Monroe's experience, Corey, because she gets a lot of backlash simply for being herself, a Black person who is trans. And this week, I think she's had to come off Twitter because of the amount of abuse that she experiences consistently every single day, where she's actually said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to just removed myself from that, because in that kind of, you know, her pursuit of being visible and being able to really put herself out there has had a detrimental effect on her mental health and subsequently on her life. And so that's the reality that some people are facing whenever they're trying to live their authentic lives.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming up onto stage, Kim.
No problem.
Right, hopefully Sharon or Sarah, there we go, Kim's gone. Maureen, I think you were next. So Maureen is from HDN, so the Housing Diversity Network. If we can have Maureen pop up on stage, fingers crossed. It's a long way to the stage. Most people are at the back, they've got a long way to come. There we go. Hi Maureen, welcome.
Hi there, everyone.
Hi, Maureen.
I'm a little bit surprised but delighted. I had no idea that I put myself forward to be on stage, but here we are. I'm going to go with it. So firstly, I want to say thank you to Corey and all the other speakers who are opening up our minds. I think education is so important in any sphere of discrimination and persecution. That's the first thing I want to say. But in particular, when somebody opens up their heart and expresses themselves from the heart, you have to give so much respect, because it's not the done thing in any sphere of life. So hopefully your messages, Corey, are hitting home. I did feel, because of who you are and your background, the fact I went to school in Tottenham, I was born in North London. What else can I say? You can see who I look like. One thing that was running through my mind is the relationship between racism in general. Because when we talk about racism in different spheres, I often find myself saying, well, actually, this includes people who are black and trans. It's not just, you know, black and minority ethnic. There are people who've got other identities as well. So when you're talking about racism, to me, it includes people. It's not exclusive. So I'm wondering what you think, anybody on the panel, but Corey in particular. How does your view about structural racism affect what happens to people who are LGBTQ plus, as well as being black or minority ethnic? How do you make sense of that relationship? Because my view is structural racism affects all BME people. And for me, that's where I start when I'm trying to understand what's going on. So in relation to you, I'm thinking, okay, there's the individual experience of your family, but there's also your wider experiences of being a member of at least two minority groups, if that makes sense. So how do you make sense of those? Hopefully you're following me, Corey, because I'm just making this up on the spot, because I wasn't expecting to be called. But hopefully you're following what I'm trying to say. And do you have anything to comment on that? And anybody else?
Thanks, Maureen. Corey, shall we start with you?
Yeah. I think there's a sense, obviously, being marginalized in the more ways in which or reasons for which you're marginalized, the more marginalization there is, and so it becomes hard. But I think there's something within the fact that you can feel isolated from, as someone who's black and LGBT, right? And given the fact that within certain parts of the black community, they're still, for various reasons, people who either don't agree with, but in all walks of life, no matter who you are, but people who don't agree with being LGBT or don't understand it maybe, or who have some sort of internalized views about that. There are parts over the recent year where we've come to stand up and fight about different things, like the George Floyd murder and stuff like that. And there were sub-conversations whereby, not just with LGBT people, but with women, and whereby there was a sense that when people were trying to say, okay, I'm fighting for well, some people, not all in all cases, but I'm fighting for Black lives. They didn't want to include trans people or LGBT people or women or and being isolated within. So being part of the Black community and then being isolated by certain people within it, not always, things have gotten better, but within certain people within it, can give this sense of I guess maybe even indignance, because you cannot, essentially, like, we're all human beings, right? Our hearts work the same, we bleed the same, we all feel the same emotion, we go through different experiences, but we all feel the same emotions. And so when you're marginalized for multiple aspects of your identity, it becomes hard to deal with. But when you are marginalized within communities that you feel like you should be part of the community within, or like you should feel at one with, it is easy to feel as though you have even more isolated, basically, like you have no place to go, if that makes sense. And sorry, can I go back to the original question? I don't know if I'm actually answering what has been asked.
Look, Corey, I think similar in that we're lateral thinkers. I'm trying to join so many dots. I'm turning myself inside out. But I was trying to move away from, not disrespectfully, but to work towards, the bigger picture about the system in which we're all living under, and how the institutions, the structure of our society operates to oppress a lot of people without us even being aware of it. It's just how, and I guess I am making a point of, asking your opinion about my opinion about the whole and how important the whole is to the individual experience. So I recognize as a fellow Black person that my individual experience is very hot for me. Equally, I'm thinking that real change won't happen unless you look at the whole, which is oppressive to people who are not mainstream. So if you're not part of the mainstream way of doing things, for whatever reason, unless we start to dismantle that, the individual experiences are going to continue. Some of it will get better, like you say, but the whole picture is not moving that well. And ironically, I would put it to you, and I know this is controversial, that if there is hostility, and I'm generalizing here, within the Black community around the history of an LGBTQ+, I'm trying to get the whole sentence in, around individuals, I also think that's an effect of racism too. So when people are persecuted for one thing, they lash out around other things. That's I don't know where that comes from, but that's my sort of instinct telling me that. But when people are liberated and have the space to be themselves in one respect, they tend to be more magnanimous and generous to other people because they've sorted themselves out. And I think that, so hence, ironically, I think the backlash that you've talked about, I also feel is an effect of racism, if you follow me, itself, because people are scrabbling around to exist, shelter, food, COVID-19. I haven't got the time to be kind or thoughtful about other issues. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it's an effect of racism. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and just jumping up what you said, like there you spoke about liberation, right? And I think like one thing that is really needed is we need to normalize celebration more. And when we celebrate individuals and authenticities and everyone in there, just people generally, and we give them the safe spaces in which to be fully themselves, which can also act as some solace away from areas in which there might be some backlash. then what happens is we stop thinking about different aspects of the person. We start thinking about people as a whole. We start just taking people for who they are. And I feel like, do you know what? There are times in which like certain things will happen, and in those moments, like you have to choose to focus on one thing at a time. And it doesn't diminish any of the other things. But it's like, for instance, I was having a conversation. So basically became a youth trustee for an organization last year. And before, and I was trying to talk to them, and I had to come at it from a perspective of like, what is my identity? What things about my identity can I give perspective to and help them develop, further progress in terms of like representing people from those different. So obviously, me being LGBT was a thing, me being Black was a thing, and some of the things I asked for, for whatever reason, because they have so much focus on that, some things I was pushing weren't the most important things to work on at the time. And then when the George Floyd murder happened, suddenly there was an email saying, oh, well, so at this date, you said this, and this and that, and we'd like to talk to you more about this now. And there was a sense of like, oh, okay, so someone has to die in order for you to, but there was also a sense of there's so much that we could work on as a society and as a nation, and there's so much progress to be made in different areas, that I had a conversation with someone, and there was a general feeling is to be fair, that at that point it was a very specific moment in time where the focus was and yeah, they should have cared about it before that happened, and it's not that they didn't, but in certain moments, we will have to just say we're focusing on this or we're focusing on that, to be honest. But I think if we normalize celebration more and liberating people I'm rambling, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I think that could help too.
Look, as a fellow rambler, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
No,
I think
that's right.
we tried to reach out. Thank you. And on that note, I'm taking my camera off so
No
you can
worries.
move on. Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank
Love you.
Yeah. I think we'll try and bring John in a second. I think a few of these questions coming up will be to do more with what we can do as organisations as well. We've got a couple more hands up there, so if we could ask Teresa to join us. Hopefully Teresa is prepared to be on stage. It won't be too much of a shock. If we could ask Teresa to come up.
Hi, thank you, Rebecca. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have tried to share my camera, but it seemed to be preventing me. So apologies for that.
That's fine, don't
issue. Fantastic discussion so far. Thank you so much for hosting and organising and supporting all these conversations. I wanted to pick up on something Stephen was saying right at the very beginning, because my interest comes from, as a dementia researcher at the University of Worcester, I was really interested in some of the research that Stephen was talking about, and also our conversations about the isolation, the stigma, and the layers of complexity that come within the discussions we've been having today. So really what I wanted to pick up on was Stephen spoke about the increase in people over the age of 55 who'd been coming forward for information, advice, etc. And I'm just thinking about if we were talking just a moment ago about these different identities and the amount of stigma. So for people with dementia, for example, when they receive a diagnosis, over half of them lose their friendship groups, lose members of their family, because families don't understand the dementia. So if we're looking at that older adult community within our housing sector, we're going to find people with these different levels of identity, levels of complexity. So I just wondered whether Steve and John or Corey or yourself, Rebecca, had come across any kind of figures, research, or working with people with dementia within your communities.
Thank you, Teresa. John, just so we're not completely leaving you out of the panel, I know you talked about the No Place Like Home research that you did, and I know that had a couple of the different demographics in there, but you know, from your experience working with organisations, what have you kind of come across when it comes to that, you know, older age category?
Yeah, so in terms of our research, we didn't pick up on dementia specifically, but I am aware that there are a number of different initiatives in the housing sector that relate to dementia, right? So there are accreditations, I think, that are kind of dementia specific. I mean, I did just want to pick up on your point around stigma as well, and the way that we set up our pledge scheme to relate quite specifically to the social housing green paper, and as a response to that, of involving residents and of kind of reducing stigma. And I think there's now a gap between where we were with the social housing green paper, which was published a couple of years ago, with the social housing white paper where we are now, which is a lot more focused on kind of, you know, holding housing associations to account rightly, but it's also about viewing people as customers and things as well. So the narrative of where we were when we started off with the pledge scheme to where we are now has kind of changed slightly. And I think that's quite interesting in terms of when you talked about stigma, it's just something that came to my mind with that.
Thank you, John. Stephen, some of the stats that you mentioned, and if Lucia had been here, I'm sure she'd have been shouting from the rooftop about it, because she's working quite a lot with the over 55 community. But if there's anything to add, Stephen, to what you said earlier.
There's a really lovely piece of research that we were working in partnership on with Tonic Housing and Opening Doors. And that was looking specifically at the housing needs of LGBTQ plus people over 55. And it was published last year. If you have a look for it, it's called Building Safe Choices. And actually, Rebecca, I've sent you a link to it, so we can share it for everybody as well. And I don't remember the stats off the top of my head. I'm sorry I hadn't prepared them for today. But what that was very clearly saying was that older people needed the same level of housing advice that some of our younger people are able to access. And as a result of that, one of the pledges that we made was that we would develop our older people service. So not specifically around dementia, but definitely that understanding that as we get older, and as that particular generation, there's a cohort of a few generations who are getting older and don't have families. You know, a lot of LGBTQ plus people now have got children, don't they? And that wasn't always the norm. Whenever, for example, some of these people grew up when being gay and being lesbian wasn't recognized and being gay was illegal, you know? And so here they are now finding themselves in the later stages of their lives without a family network to provide support. Often there's a link between loneliness and older LGBTQ plus people. And so again, I wonder, I don't know this, but I wonder about how that filters in with some of the work that you're looking at around dementia. So I would really encourage you to have a look at that report, Building Safe Choices. I think it's called Building Safe Choices 2020, because there was another one we did a few years ago. And if you haven't already, link in with Tonic Housing, an amazing organisation that are specifically working at retirement communities for LGBTQ plus people, and Opening Doors, who specifically work with older LGBTQ plus people around social inclusion. They do loads of stuff, but that's a nice way of kind of talking about the work that they do. So yeah, there is some work, and I'm sure there's more to be done. And I'd be really interested in having conversations with you about how we might be able to feed into that.
Thank you both, and thank you, Rebecca, for facilitating that. And not to leave Corey out, you were amazing. Thank you both.
Thanks for coming up, Teresa.
All right, thanks, Rebecca. Bye, everyone.
Right, and I'm going to try and smoothly bring Martin onto stage, so where we've only got 15 minutes left of our panel discussions. Hopefully, Martin will be joining us on stage. There we are. Welcome, Martin. Nice to meet you.
Right, so I'm from Stockport Homes, just outside Greater Manchester. So one of two questions, really, since I heard the discussion between Maureen and Corey. My first question is, how important do you think it is for a company to have an LGBTQ specific logo during history and pride? Because I heard somebody say an organisation needs to come out first before they expect their staff and customers to come out. And then my second one, just to put in there, thoughts around equality or inequality around intersectionality, and that's coming off the back of the speak that Corey just had with Maureen, and listening to how he feels in his LGBT self he might find more over his BAME life. Do you know what I mean? So what are your thoughts on there? So I'll leave it with you.
Cool, thanks, Marty. If we start with the first half of that question, I think it's probably one more for John and Stephen to come back on with some of the accreditation, training, and pledge work that we do. So if we start with John, then come to Stephen, and then let Corey have a think about the second half of that question, if that's okay. So yeah, over to you, John.
Yeah, no, it really touches on where we came to with the pledge scheme, and visibility was so important in all of our discussions with residents, and how important it is for our housing providers to be visible, which is why it became one of our kind of core principles underpinning the Pledge Pioneer part of the pledge scheme. And I think it kind of suffuses through everything as well. So I know that from a house proud perspective, we think it's so important, which is why we do try and attend so many different prides across the country. So we have our bus when we're allowed to have a bus at a London Pride, and then we also go to kind of some more regional prides and things as well, and also UK Black Pride. And then also from a Clarion perspective, we find it so useful. So in LGBT History Month things, we do change our Twitter logo to our LGBT Clarion logo, and then also to have that really visible at prides. And then we get so much good feedback from being involved in Brighton Pride, for example, that it just, you know, it pays for itself. It's the right thing to do, basically.
Great, thanks, John. Stephen?
I absolutely agree. Visibility, I think, is key. The thing that I would just caution people against is, have you heard of the term pride washing, where companies kind of, you know, all of a sudden come out with their LGBT, you know, logo, and that's kind of it. Do you remember Marks and Spencer's brought out their LGBT sandwich one year? They, you know, like, so there's this kind of, there's that pride washing thing. I think people just have to be careful of, you know, and I would say that if you're using a pride logo, you have to understand what it means for LGBTQ plus people. When I go into an organization, a supermarket, a pub, wherever I'm going, if I see the pride flag, I immediately know that I'm welcome here. That's what it means, you know? Like, so whenever we say to our service users, this place is for you, that's one way that we can do it, by demonstrating the pride logo. I would say, though, organizations that do that have to follow it up with training for their staff. They have to look at their policies, make sure they're inclusive. Some organizations have policies that are not inclusive at all of the LGBTQ plus their staff, but they do have this gorgeous pride flag at the front of their building or on their Twitter or whatever. So I think you have to be really cautious of that. But visibility is so important. I wish we could encourage every single organization in the whole country, not just housing, John, but, you know, housing is where we should be starting. But I want every shop to have a sign on the window that says, if you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're bisexual, whatever, this shop is for you. And we will not put up with any kind of discrimination. If someone commits a crime against you in this shop, they will be arrested. We will report them to the police. You know, that's what I want the whole country to be like. And I think a really good place for us to start is by, you know, working with our colleagues in housing and saying, demonstrate to your customers that this place is for them. And yeah, that journey of coming out, I think, is one that is really important. And one that the House Pride Pledge is a really fantastic thing for you to do. Getting some training with an organization like Stonewall Housing, you know, having a look at our inclusion standard, all that stuff can help you on that journey as you go through it.
We are part of House Proud Northwest, by the way. So yeah, we have signed up to the pledge, and I completely get it with all the back office stuff, policies and things. I think we're Stockport Homes. I think they're really forefront in all of that stuff. I think we're just a bit slow up on the uptake of the logo, shall we say, like the rainbow logo. But I think you're right in regards to pride washing and that stupid sandwich.
So nobody's a fan of the sandwich then. That went down a treat. Just bringing it to the second half of Martin's question, if you can remember, Corey, and if not, we can ask Martin just to go through it again. But question about, again, off the back of what Maureen was saying, really about how lots of these things overlap and how that kind of affects your experiences, I guess, of going through things. But
yeah, and I just like to say, like, all of us have so many dimensions to us, right? And I just wanted to comment, and when I was talking earlier, I didn't want it to seem as though I felt less in tune with any other side of me, whether that be my Black heritage or anything else. It's just today I'm talking more about LGBT sides, and I feel like what I was more saying is there are times at which like certain aspects of our identities can be at loggerheads, based on various factors, right? And we're placed in boxes, usually based on a single dimension, whatever comes to light at the time. And as opposed to being like evaluated or appreciated on holistically, partially, usually in a lot of cases, because we aren't aware or in detail of each other's experiences, or what all of the things that we identify with or whatever. So in certain moments, like, because I know, fun fact, but I'm actually Jewish by heritage, you know? So at one point when I was staying in Stoke Newton, I walked down the street and some of the like more orthodox Jewish community, like there'd be times where they'd cross the street as soon as they saw me coming. And there was one occasion where I did say, I'm Jewish too, so I don't know where you're going. But I feel like that's why, especially with intersectionality, I think that's why we're very as a society, as in terms of the media and stuff like that, we do, when we evaluate, we don't always do it in terms of appreciating and celebrating each other fully, right? And I think if we normalize, what I was trying to say earlier is, I think if we normalize sharing more, like sharing openly, and it's hard because you can't control what others will do, the backlashes, and there is still backlash today as we're seeing, but we do have control over whether we choose to be ourselves or not. So if we normalize being really open and sharing our stories really openly and all of our experiences, we'll find a lot more similarities than differences anyway. And one other thing that will be normalized is seeing each other more holistically and in more depth and detail, and that will enable compassion. It will enable a domino effect whereby other people can share the same, and that has domino effect, and we see that everyone is more the same than we realize, but also a lot more so much themselves, that we shouldn't really be comparing people in the way that we do all the time. And until we do that, we different things will come to light at different times. So at times we're going to need to, and I know someone said in the chat, like, there's discrimination happens throughout all walks of life, not just Black and LGBT people, and yeah, it does. And I can only speak to my experiences, but what I was more trying to say is not that it only happens within those communities, and more that at different times different things will come to light, and there'll be different experiences whereby we're called to speak up on a certain thing, until we get to a place where we can just appreciate each other as human beings, and not based on what we look like or who we love or anything like that, because really and truly that's no one else's business, A, and B, yeah, it just yeah, we're all just human, we're all human beings, we're all just same in so many ways. And yeah, I did not actually answer your question, because I feel like I'm rambling.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it just wanted to know, obviously with intersectionality only being like a word that's been thrown around since about 2015, that in certain aspects of your life, being obviously from the BAME background and LGBT, that there is going to be inequalities. Yeah. Inequality. So you might have equality in your Black self, but actually in your LGBT self, that's nowhere near equality. So it's just, intersectionality is just a new thing, isn't it, that we're trying to work out, and as you say, respect everybody's individual little bubbles that make up a person holistically, which, yeah, you did answer it, to be honest, Corey.
Sweet. Thank you for joining us, Martin. I'll get you the stairs to remove you from the stage. Oh, wait, you're gone. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we've got a few minutes. We might run over a little bit, which hopefully people won't mind too much, because there are loads of questions and loads of things going on in the chat. Just interested, I guess, like a lot of people here are talking about colleagues. So, you know, how we can support, you know, because these kind of things are going to be happening to people that you walk down the street next to, people you work with, you know, family members and stuff like that. So I just wondered what we can do to, you know, create great allies, how people can be a good ally, you know, what we can do within our organisations to start some of these conversations off, other than, you know, maybe celebrating Pride and things like that, you know, because it needs to be much more than that, doesn't it? So again, if we've got some kind of logical order, if we start with John and then Stephen, that would be great.
Just from a house power perspective and in terms of allyship and things like that, it's so important because House Proud only really exists because we have organizational LGBT networks as well. And those organizational LGBT networks, the kind of foundation stone is basically just people getting involved, right? And people trying to have that internal influence within an organization to get stuff done and to get things underway. So allyship is so important for helping to kind of foment that kind of that environment and that climate to get things happening. It's also so important because it's really important to embrace kind of really proactive allies as well, because they help to get things done. And I think it's all basically about getting things done. And so some of the practical ways that could help within organizations is we have a really good ally within Clarion, Kathy, who lives in Brighton. Her husband's a DJ. So for us, for when we go into Brighton Pride, that's fantastic because she's there on the ground in Brighton and her husband does a DJing at the back of the float. So I think that's just a really practical example of how allyship can really work in an organization.
Brilliant, thanks, John. Stephen?
I think that allyship, I mean, I absolutely agree that it's hugely important in every workplace that there's this culture of LGBTQ plus inclusion and that we really champion allyship. I think one of the ways that you can do it is by thinking about the language that you use and really about not making any assumptions. So you see at the start of our presentations today, we introduced our pronouns. And that's kind of something that still feels a bit new for some people. You know, they're like, well, of course your pronouns are he and him. You've got a big ginger lockdown beard. You know, like what else would your pronouns be? But of course, that's not true. You know, pronouns are very personal, and it's absolutely okay to ask someone what their pronouns are. The other thing that I think can really help in organizations is when you've got leadership and senior leadership who are LGBTQ plus. And I would really encourage them to be super out in the organization. So before I had this job, I used to work at Bernardo's, the children's charity. And I used to go in on a Monday morning and be like, well, my husband and I had a lovely weekend this weekend, you know, just really demonstrating to everybody that not only is it acceptable for you to be yourself in the workplace, actually it's expected. It's absolutely okay for you to share stories about your partner, whether they're same sex or different sex. It's absolutely okay for you to talk about, you know, your gender identity, you know, all of those kind of things. And I'm always reminded of a friend of mine who I used to work, I'm a social worker and my background is in social work, and she's a social worker too. And she used to at work talk about her husband, and her husband's name was Gloria, and that, you know, it was a woman that she'd been with for many, many years. But at work, she found it much easier to just pretend that she was a guy, so that nobody would ask any questions and things like that. And I think a really good way of helping people see that they don't have to do that is by just asking them, you know, if you don't know, oh, is your partner a man or a woman? Oh, right, okay, cool. You know, like that's just a really nice way of doing what Corey was talking about, which is just normalizing the experience of having LGBTQ plus people in your network.
Amazing, thank you. Some really good tips there, hopefully for people to take away. And just before we kind of bring ourselves into the final session, and this might be a challenge because I realise we're all quite chatty, if you just have like 30 seconds each to kind of, how do we stop this just being an ongoing conversation? I think one of the striking things for me is that when I hear about the experiences of Lucia and Angela, that was nearly 50, well, it was 50 years ago, you know, when they were basically having the same conversations. And yes, some things will have improved, but then you hear Corey speak, and actually a lot of those issues are still really quite prominent, and certainly things that we've probably all experienced here on this panel, you know, pretty frequently. So what are your hopes? You know, if we were sat here in 10 years time, a year's time, whatever it might be, what do you want to have seen changed? Or, you know, what are the things you'd like to see people start doing after today? So if we again just go John, Stephen, and then finish on Corey, that would be amazing.
So I think there's been a clear progression of where things have improved, and I think they focus in different areas. So if you think about the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, clearly has helped for the workplace, and then we look at kind of our House Proud Pledge scheme, which delivers something very specific, which is around housing governance. But where we need to get to now is really to hear kind of the voices of LGBT residents as well, and that's very much linked in with the Social Housing Green and the Social Housing White Paper. And so just from a House Proud perspective, where we hope to get to with the next phase of the work is potentially to set up a network group for LGBT residents. And it's those voices that I think will really then affect change within the sector.
Great, thanks. Stephen?
I think for me, it's all about partnership working. You know, we recognize that we're not going to be able to do this on our own. You know, we want every single LGBTQ person in the country to have access to services that meet their specific needs. And I want to do that in partnership with people who are already working with those people. So, you know, having events like this, building partnerships. I've already had a few people email me saying, hey, let's work together. Let's do it. You know, like, let's find a way to take all of those ideas forward. And for us at Stonewall Housing, that's about this national helpline for LGBTQ plus people that have got some kind of homelessness or housing issue, and then working in partnership with organizations all over the country to make sure that they've got the access to the services that they need.
Amazing, thank you, Stephen. And finally, Corey, aka Superman. I think the hat is like perfectly quality for this event and how you've been. So we'll finish on you if that's okay.
I think that one thing I hope that happens is, I know that conversations have been started, as you said, like we've been having conversations and stuff like that, but I just want to echo like what Stephen was saying about asking questions and stuff like that. I feel like although that continues the conversation, I feel like people have listened at times to things and there has been progress made, but I still think there's a sense of like sometimes we make judgments before we ask questions, and there's only so far that conversations can go from there. And yeah, and I mean that in terms of like different things, like and I've experienced that in terms of like some people, when I'm trying to explain clinical depression to them, they're like, no, you're just being lazy. And I'm like, oh, well, here's my doctor's details. Go into but also I feel like right now within society, I feel like certain narratives are featured, and there's narratives in the forefront. There, like when we turn on TV, when we look at billboards or the media or things like that, there are certain narratives that are normal just because they've always been there, and yeah, they are very heteronormative, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's still people's realities. But in terms of putting other narratives at the forefront in a more proportionate way, and normalizing those narratives existing and then being just as normal, just as real for the people that they are just as real for us. We just educating and training and hammering things into ourselves as opposed to just having the conversations, I think would help a lot more. It's just, I think it's a constant process of normalization and acceptance and celebration, and I've said that a lot. But yeah, that's the way I feel.
Amazing, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for staying with us for the panel. We do have 10 minutes left, but I would like to thank John and Corey as they get dragged off stage, not too unceremoniously, but thank you so much for your contributions today. Really interesting perspectives, and yeah, it takes great courage, you know, in any situation to come and talk about some of these things when you've experienced it yourself with both John and Corey. So thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully what we should be able to do now for the final 10 minutes or so is welcome Kat and Tina onto stage from Stonewall Housing. So you've heard them referenced a lot throughout today. We've partnered as the CIH with Stonewall Housing to deliver the event. And some of the questions were really about, well, what can we do? You know, people feel inspired, they feel pumped to do something. And what we wanted to do was really end on a high note, where we could go through some of the really good resources and things that are available to people. So if I hand over, I think, to Stephen or Kat, and let these guys take it away for these final 10 minutes. And if you all have your notepads at the ready, hopefully you'll get some really good ideas to take away and start working on straight away.
I'm Stephen.
I was on mute there, Kat. Let me kick off by thinking about some of the things that I said in my presentation. I think there's a real opportunity today for everybody who's here, whether you work in an organisation that is already really LGBTQ plus inclusive, or if you work in an organisation where actually it feels a bit kind of far away and it feels a bit foreign to you. I think what everyone can do is go back to your organisation and start that conversation. Have the conversation with the senior managers, have the conversation with the people who make the decisions about that organisation, and ask them what it is they're doing to make sure that they're LGBTQ plus inclusive. There's some really simple things that can kick you off on this journey. You know, I love this idea of you being on your coming out journey and, you know, us being able to support you around that. I think John's offer around the House Pride Pledge is a fantastic way to start, and also one that isn't really intensive in terms of resources. It doesn't cost you any money to do the House Pride Pledge, and what a wonderful way to demonstrate to your colleagues, to the staff that you work with, and to your service users that you're serious about this. And then follow that up with some training for your staff. Help them feel confident to ask those questions. I saw someone in the Q&A put earlier that we do ask the questions, but no one tells us whether they're LGBTQ plus or not. Think about some of the things that that might be the reason for that, you know, and think, right, how can I make sure that this organisation is doing what it needs to do? I think Tina will talk about it in more detail, but I think the inclusion standard that we have that kind of builds on the House Pride Pledge and really demonstrates again that you're, as one of the housing organisations in the UK, you're dedicated to LGBTQ plus issues. And I think as well, one of the things I often say to people is don't give yourself a hard time if you haven't, you know, you're not far enough on that journey yet. Even if you're right at the start of it, don't worry about that. You know, like, don't give yourself a hard time. If you get things wrong, that's all right. We all get stuff wrong, you know, but just make sure you've got a really nice plan in place for your journey, your coming out story, so that your staff can come out and your service users can come out too. That's kind of my summary, Rebecca, of what I think people could actually do to move things forward. Kat, shall I hand over to you?
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So I came on briefly before and I realised I didn't really introduce myself. My name's Kat. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Fundraising and Initiatives Manager for Stonewall Housing. I've worked at Stonewall Housing for over 10 years, and I've worked in lots of different roles across the organisation, and I've seen us move forward in ways that we didn't think were possible just a few short years ago. In 2019, I took up fundraising and initiatives, and I started the House of Stonewall because we had so many service users who had written us cards and emails and letters and phone calls from people as far back as the 80s saying, you literally saved my life. Like, I don't know where I would have been without Stonewall Housing. People like Corey, who's just fantastic. My phone has not stopped ringing about how amazing he is. So thank you again, Corey, for coming to speak today. And it's those stories that I thought, this is what people need to hear. These are the stories, this is the impact that will really make a difference when it comes to being more inclusive in your own services, and also commissioning services like ours to keep this good work going. The House of Stonewall it's a collective. It's about our current service users and our alumni coming together to help feed back into service delivery, work on projects and campaigns for the organisation to raise awareness and raise fundraising. And then we've got our champions. Champions can be individuals, they can be monthly donors, they can be corporates, they can be our partners, they can be providers that all help us raise awareness and help us achieve our mission to end LGBT homelessness. So if anybody wants to know about how to join the House of Stonewall or talk to us about our upcoming projects, please just email me, kat@stonewallhousing.org. You'll all be sent a follow-up email with direct links to email me, Tina and Stephen, to talk about anything, any ideas you have for this event. But a real friendly bunch. We're always up for collaborating. We're always up for partnership work. We've got some really exciting projects with the House of Stonewall this year, including, I mentioned earlier in the chat, a series about faith, religion, ethnicity and culture, BME, and how this relates to housing. We're always looking for sponsorship. We're always looking for venues. And when we're back in the real world, we will be making a splash. We will be coming out with our events. You can look on our YouTube and look at some of the things that we've done before. Our Pride video, I believe, is in the room, in the networking room today. And our Queer Story video of our event for LGBT History Month last year should be available too. So don't be shy, get in touch, go on my LinkedIn, email me, email my boss, email my colleagues. We really want to work with people and build the House of Stonewall. So that's all I have to say. Handing over to Tina.
Hi, I'm going to do training in 2 seconds, or as quick as I can fit it in 2 minutes. So my name's Tina Wallen. I'm Director of Education and Engagement for Stonewall Housing, which means I'm involved in designing and delivering all of our training. My pronouns are she and her. I worked for Stonewall Housing for, oh gosh, about 9 years now. Started off working in our older people's work. And like I say, it's my responsibility to deliver all of our training and what our training includes. And I think what I'd like to start by saying is that, you know, at the heart of our training are people's narratives and people's stories, people like Corey, the people that we work with, the experiences that we have of housing providers and local authorities. And we do for, you know, small, reasonably sized organisation, we actually do quite a lot of training. We've trained something like 1,800 people in the last 2 years. And that includes moving everything onto Zoom in March time, in quite a short space of time. And we do a lot of different training courses. It's interesting what John was saying about the no place like home and people not feeling safe about maintenance operatives, because one of the pieces of training that we do is about training contractors and training maintenance operatives, and it builds on some work we've already done with London and Quadrant and Shepherd's Bush Housing. And in actual fact, I'm starting that piece of work next week with another organisation, and we go from doing that to doing our inclusion standard, which is this audited quality mark. And that was originally designed for older people services, and it's held by Notting Hill Genesis. They're the only people who hold it at the moment. And we've widened that now to include any housing provider. And it includes consultancy about anything that impacts LGBTQ customers. It's about training, and it has an audit process that we hope will involve residents of the provider who are doing the inclusion standard. So we provide a wide range of training. I won't give you the whole long list because there's a whole long list, but we look at housing issues for LGBTQ people from BMER communities, which addresses some of those issues that were spoken about earlier. Older LGBTQ people in care and support settings, supporting LGBTQ families in housing need, trans people in housing policy, housing options for older LGBTQ people, LGBTQ awareness in a housing context, amongst a lot of others. And it always starts with a conversation. Our training is bespoke to you. It's designed for you and with you, obviously on Zoom at the moment. And everyone who commissions our training gets a report on the completion of the training, which includes feedback data and an overview of training. And we can also tailor it to a specific campaign if you want to do something in LGBT History Month or Pride or World Homeless Day. It's all about what it is that your organisation needs from us in terms of training. And, you know, LGBTQ people, you've heard Cora's story, you've heard lots of other people give examples of how LGBTQ people experience different needs and vulnerabilities and their experiences with housing, and making sure your residents feel safe enough to be able to tell you about themselves, to tell you about some of those issues is really significant. You know, the smallest thing can make the difference. It can be as simple as asking about a pronoun. If you illustrate to a customer that you've thought about them, it's a really powerful thing, and it can be something so simple. You know, and our training is all about assisting providers to achieve high levels of good practice for LGBTQ customers. And that's why we encourage, somebody was saying earlier on about training, you know, I think that might be new, Stephen, actually, about training senior managers. You know, we would encourage organisations to do kind of company-wide training packages. So from, you know, contractors to senior managers. Yeah, I think that's about it. But you can reach me. My email address is on my profile. I'm also going to be hosting a virtual training drop-in if people want to know about that. And I'm also going to chair an event in March around LGBT women's health. So if you can come to those, please do. But please email me if you want to have any discussions around training and how we can, you know, best help your organisation to achieve that really good practice. Right.
Thank you, Tina. I'm very impressed with all three of you for fitting that into 10 minutes after taking away 5 minutes of your time. So thank you so much for partnering with us on this event. Kat, you've been amazing in the run-up to organising all of it. So well done to you. Thank you for all that you've done. I was going to say, this is the bit where everybody claps, but so we'll virtually clap all of our speakers and all of our helpers for today. Thank you so much. The follow-up email will be with you in the next day or so. So please keep an eye on your inbox for that, because that will have all of the links and the recordings from today's session. Please do get in touch with any of the guys if you've got any questions, any feedback for us at CIH as to what the professional body can be doing more of on all of these issues. We would love to hear from people firsthand about that. Tina, you're getting us your email, so if you can type that into the chat, that would be amazing, and we'll include it in the follow-up emails as well, so everyone knows who's who. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm really proud that we've been able to deliver an event like this for the first time through CIH, and we couldn't have done it without any of you. So thank you so much. And we hope to see you all soon. Keep an eye on our Twitter for the rest of the month for what's going on. There's loads of blogs and videos on there as well. And yeah, hopefully anything that you do, no matter how small, will make a huge difference. I can promise you that, because people will notice and it will give a lot of comfort to people. So take care, everybody. Keep staying safe, and we'll see you on our next virtual event.